district where you can get traction and get clarity, get confidence, build proof, and then use that proof to keep mining.
If education sales has you second guessing yourself, take a breath. This is a trust-first, relationship-driven market, and the old tactics, they don't translate. This show replaces guesswork with clarity and a customer acquisition system that builds a pipeline you can trust. I'm Josh Chernikoff, two-time education founder with 2 exits and a lead gen coach for companies in education. Through my ed sales elevation experience over the last 2 years, I've coached 210 companies to leads on repeat. In 2025 alone, I delivered over 2,600 hours of coaching to education companies. My co-host is John Gamba. He also has a successful exit, and now he's the Director of Innovative Programs and the Entrepreneur in Residence at Penn's Graduate School of Education. This is the only show dedicated to customer acquisition for education companies, so consistent listeners go from stalled deals to clarity, credibility, and a pipeline they can rely on. This is Ed Sales Edge, where education company founders earn their edge.
Welcome to Ed Sales Edge. In today's episode, we're going to talk about what Moneyball can teach you about finding better leads. Most education founders think the way to grow is to find more leads, more outreach, more lists, more people to talk to. But that's not how the best founders grow. The best founders don't just find more leads, they extract better opportunities from the right market. And that distinction matters because in education, volume can fool you. A full pipeline can still be a weak pipeline. A lot of conversations can still create no movement, and more activity can still leave you feeling like nothing is actually compounding. So today we're going to talk about mining, not prospecting, not chasing, not constantly starting over. Mining, finding the value that's already there, but that you haven't learned how to see yet. Before we get into this, I just want to say thank you for all the messages and well wishes over the last couple of weeks. And I'm recording this less than 2 weeks after triple bypass surgery, so I'm taking it easy. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll notice I'm off camera for this one while I recover. But I wanted to get back behind the mic because this show matters to me. I'll be sharing a lot more about that journey over time. For now, just know I'm recovering well. The team has been incredible, and the show must go on. My plan is to be back on camera in June. But today, audio will do just fine. Because this lesson is too important to skip. There's a story that explains this better than almost anything else. Moneyball, Billy Beane, the Oakland A's, one of the lowest payrolls in baseball, going up against teams with 3, 4, sometimes 5 times the money. And here's what most people remember about Moneyball. They think it was about data. And yes, data was part of it. But the deeper lesson is not just use data. The deeper lesson is this. The Oakland A's couldn't afford to play the same game as the Yankees. They couldn't go after the biggest names. They couldn't buy the obvious stars. They couldn't win by competing for the same players everyone else wanted. Because the big organizations were always going after the big players, the famous players, the obvious players, the expensive players. And when you're a giant organization with a giant budget, you can do that. You can overpay, you can miss sometimes, you can absorb inefficiency, but when you're smaller, you don't have that luxury. You have to see differently. You have to find value other people miss. You have to ask better questions. That's what Billy Beane did. He didn't ask, who looks like a star? He asked, where is value being mispriced? That question changed everything. And now here's why this matters for you. Because a lot of education founders are trying to play the Yankees game. They're going after the biggest districts, the biggest systems, the most visible opportunities. the names everyone recognizes, and I understand why. Big districts look attractive. Big systems feel like the prize. Big logos feel like validation. But here's the problem. Everybody sees those opportunities. Everybody wants them. Everybody is trying to get in. And if you are a small organization selling into education, trying to compete there too early can burn you out. Because those big systems can be slow, they can be political, they can have layers and layers of decision makers. They can take months just to tell you they're interested. And interest is not a deal. Interest is not traction. Interest is not momentum. So sometimes the better move is not to chase the biggest name. Sometimes the better move is to find the smaller school district, the smaller institution, the more agile leader, the place where the problem is real, the decision path is clearer, and the win can happen faster. That's Moneyball for education founders, mining. This is something I think about from my conversation with Brooke Olson Farrell. Brooke is a superintendent in Vermont. And what I loved about that conversation is that Brooke represents the kind of education leader founders should pay attention to, not because she's the biggest district in America, not because she's chasing shiny things, but because she understands implementation. She values outcomes. She wants partners who reduce friction, not vendors who add noise. That is gold. When you find a leader like that, you are not trying to convince them that outcomes matter. They already know outcomes matter. You are not trying to explain why implementation is important. They already live implementation every day. Your job becomes simpler. Align, listen. Understand the environment, find the right entry point. Deliver a meaningful win. That's how smaller, more focused opportunities can become the foundation of real traction. That's how confidence gets built. Not from chasing the giant opportunity that never moves, but from finding the right opportunity that actually lets you prove value. Most founders look at their market and think, there's not enough demand. There aren't enough buyers. This space is slow. But that's not always what's happening. What's actually happening is this. You're looking at your market the same way everyone else is. You're looking for the obvious buyer, the obvious logo, the obvious district, the obvious opportunity. But obvious usually means crowded, and crowded usually means expensive. Not always in dollars, sometimes expensive in time, expensive in energy, expensive in emotional bandwidth, expensive in confidence, because you can spend 6 months chasing a district that looks like the dream and come out with nothing but polite emails and a bruised belief in your own business. That's the cost of playing the wrong game. You don't need more leads. You need to see the leads you already have differently. You need to stop asking, where is the biggest possible opportunity? And start asking, where is value being overlooked? Where is the buyer more reachable? Where is the pain clearer? Where is implementation more realistic? Where can we create a win that compounds? That's the Moneyball question. Quick pause. If you're listening to this and you're already thinking, yeah, I've been talking to a lot of people, but nothing's really moving. Don't sit on that. Don't wait until the end of the episode. Just text me directly. 7713334233. Tell me what you sell, who you've been talking to, and where things feel stuck. I personally would read every text myself. All right, let's keep going. Let me give you another way to think about this. Gold mining. Because Moneyball helps us understand value, but gold mining helps us understand depth. Amateurs dig everywhere.
They grab a shovel, pick a spot, and start digging. No data, no pattern, no patience, just effort. And effort can feel productive. You're sweating. You're moving. You're doing something. But that doesn't mean you're getting closer to gold. Professionals don't mine that way. Professionals study the land. They look for signals. They study the history of the terrain. They ask, where has gold been found before? What conditions made it possible? What patterns are showing up below the surface? What are the signs that this place is worth deeper investment? They don't dig more randomly. They dig smarter. And once they find the right place, they don't leave after the first shovel. They go deeper. That's mining. Mining is not, let me go find more people. Mining is, let me extract more value from the right places. And this is where most founders in education get stuck, because they're constantly resetting new list, new outreach, new audience, new messaging, new campaign, new channel, new idea. And sometimes, yes, you need to adjust. But a lot of the time, founders are not adjusting strategically. They're escaping too early. They have a few conversations. They don't immediately turn into deals. So they assume the market is wrong. They assume the list is wrong. They assume the message is wrong. And they move on. But what if the gold was there? What if you just didn't mine deeply enough? What if you had signal, but you didn't recognize it? What if the first conversation wasn't the deal, but it was the map? That's the difference. Because in education, opportunity is layered. Inside one district, there are multiple buyers. Inside one institution, there are multiple entry points. Inside one relationship, there are multiple pathways to a decision. One superintendent conversation can lead to a principal. One principal conversation can reveal a district-level initiative. One department leader can tell you where the real pain lives. One pilot can reveal the bigger system problem. But you only see that when you slow down enough to mine. If you're moving too fast, you miss the signals. If you're constantly chasing the next lead, you miss the map inside the lead you already have. Think about what a professional miner does. They don't just ask, Ida, did I find gold today? They ask, what did this site teach me? They collect information and they study the ground. They notice what repeats. They learn where the vein might be. That's what a founder has to do in education. Every conversation should make your map better, even if it does not close. Conversation with a small district can teach you who owns the problem, what language they use, what budget pressure exists, what internal politics are real, what implementation fear blocks action, what makes one leader move while another waits. That is not wasted effort. That is mining data, but only if you treat it that way. Before we go further, quick pause. If what I'm describing feels familiar, like you've been putting in effort, having conversations, but not seeing real movement, there's a good chance you're not looking at the right environments in the first place. And that's why we built the targeting map. It helps you identify where your best clients already exist. And more importantly, where value is already understood. Because mining only works if you're digging in the right place. And if you want it, it's in the show notes. You can scan the QR code or just text targeting to 7713334-233 and we'll send it to you. All right, let's get back to it. Let's go back to Moneyball, because Billy Beane didn't just find undervalued players once. He built a system for seeing them. That's the important part. Like, it wasn't a lucky guess. It wasn't one clever move. It was pattern recognition. He knew which stats actually mattered. He knew which signals were misleading.
He knew which players were being overlooked because the market was using the wrong filters. And that is exactly what happens in education sales. Most founders use the wrong filters. They filter by size. They filter by logo. They filter by who looks impressive. They filter by who responds fastest, and they filter by who seems excited. But excitement is not the same as readiness. Size is not the same as fit. A recognizable name is not the same as momentum. And a positive conversation is not the same as a real opportunity. That's where founders get hurt. They mistake interest for signal. They mistake access for traction. They mistake activity for movement. So let me ask you something. When you look at your pipeline right now, do you know which conversations are real opportunities? Which ones are just interest? Which ones will stall? Which ones will move? Which ones are worth mining deeper? Which ones need to be released? Because if everything looks the same to you, you're not mining yet. You're guessing. And guessing is expensive in education. This is where smaller districts can be such a powerful strategy. Not because small automatically means better. It doesn't. A small district can still be messy. A small school can still be misaligned. A small organization can still waste your time. But smaller environments often give founders something they desperately need early: access to the real pain, access to the real decision maker, access to implementation reality, access to feedback, access to proof. And proof is what lets you grow. This is why chasing the biggest name first can be dangerous. You might get a meeting. You might even get interest. But if you can't create proof, you can't compound. And if you can't compound, you don't have a lead engine. You have a chase. Let's make this real. Wayne Bouvier is the CEO of Higher Digital. Wayne works with universities navigating digital transformation. That's a complicated space. Technology platforms, institutional change, legacy systems, faculty needs, student experience, administrative pressure. It would be very easy to talk about that in a way that sounds smart but doesn't move anyone. But Wayne clarified the transformation. The work became about helping universities move from fragmented digital initiatives to aligned institution-wide digital transformation. That's mining. Because once the transformation is clear, you start seeing the right opportunities differently. You stop chasing any university with a technology problem. You start looking for institutions where fragmentation is already visible, where leaders already feel the cost, where alignment matters enough to move. That's the difference between random prospecting and intelligent mining. Paul King is another example. Paul is the founder of Neighborhood Educational Partners in New York. Paul works with students who are struggling academically, especially in math. For many students, Algebra 1 becomes the breaking point. Fail the Regents exam, and graduation itself becomes uncertain. Now, Paul could have stayed broad. He could have talked about tutoring. He could have talked about academic support. He could have talked about helping students improve. All true. But broad. When the work sharpened, the opportunity sharpened. The transformation became from failing algebra and losing confidence to passing the Regents and rebuilding academic momentum. That changes the mining process. Now, you're not looking for every school that needs tutoring. You're looking for schools where algebra is a pressure point, where Regents' outcomes matter, where students are at risk, where leaders feel urgency, where the problem is not nice to have and it's consequential. That's gold. Not because the school is the biggest and because the problem is sharp. Rose Hastreiter is another example. She's the founder of Leonti 3C. Rose was serving multiple school-facing audiences. That sounds flexible, but flexibility can hide fragmentation. When she narrowed to the buyer who actually controlled budget, her messaging sharpened. She stopped explaining herself. She started booking clearer, faster conversations, and her pipeline stopped feeling random. That is what happens when mining gets precise. You stop digging in every direction. You stop treating every audience like equal opportunity. You find the buyer who has the pressure, the budget, and the reason to move. Catherine Adebonyan had a similar pattern. Catherine is the founder of Go Pursue. Catherine had traction. People liked the work. Districts liked the idea. But liking the idea is not the same as acting on it. Her positioning was broad. And because it was broad, the market could agree without moving. When she tightened to one specific district-level buyer with urgency, things changed. Objections dropped. Cycles shortened. The offer didn't change. The targeting did. She secured funding after clarifying the buyer. That's the lesson. Sometimes your product does not need to change. Your mining does. The gold was not in more people. The gold was in the right buyer, under the right pressure, at the right time. And that brings me back to the larger pattern. Different founders, different products, different markets. Same issue. Unstable targeting creates unstable revenue. When your message changes depending on who you're talking to, you're not positioned. You're negotiating your identity in real time. And when you're negotiating your identity in every conversation, mining becomes impossible. Because you don't know what signal you're looking for. You don't know what counts as gold. Everything looks interesting. Everything feels possible. Everything deserves a follow-up. And that is how founders exhaust themselves. This is why Moneyball matters. Billy Beane had to know what counted. He had to know which statistics actually predicted value. He had to ignore the noise. He had to stop caring about what the market traditionally celebrated. That is what education founders have to learn. Stop overvaluing. Big names, polite interest, vague enthusiasm, large lists. Conference conversations that feel good but don't move. Start valuing urgency, budget reality, decision access, implementation fit, buyer maturity, repeatable pain, internal champions. Those are your stats. That's your Moneyball data. And this is where something from a past conversation stuck with me. I was talking with Michael Fung, who leads the Institute for the Future of Education, in a special live recorded episode at IFE in Monterrey, Mexico, back when this show was breaking the grade. We were talking about how decisions actually happen inside institutions. And one of the things that became clear is this: what looks like one opportunity is usually a system. Multiple stakeholders, multiple incentives, multiple timelines, multiple constraints. And if you don't understand that system, you can't mine it. You might see the surface, you might see a conversation, you might see a meeting, but you won't see the vein. And the vein is where the value is, and that's why mining requires patience. Not passive patience, strategic patience. The kind of patience that says, I'm not leaving this market just because the first conversation didn't close. I'm going to learn what this conversation is telling me. I'm going to understand who else is involved. I'm going to find the pattern. I'm going to see where this problem shows up again. That's how you move from scarcity to abundance. Not by pretending every lead is good, but by learning how to see where opportunity actually lives. So let's make this practical, because this is where things change. First shift, stop resetting. Start going deeper. If you've already had conversations in a space, don't leave it too quickly. Go back and look again. Ask, what did I learn? Who was actually carrying the pain? Who had power? Who had urgency? Who had budget? Who understood the outcome? Who was polite but not serious? There's more there than you saw the first time. But you only find it if you stop treating every non-close like failure. Sometimes a non-close is not failure. Sometimes it's information. And information is part of mining. Second shift, learn to spot signal versus noise. Not every yes means something. Not every this is interesting matters. Not every reply is worth chasing. Signal sounds different. Signal sounds like we're dealing with this right now. This is tied to a board priority. We have funding for this. Our current approach is not working. This is becoming urgent. Who else have you done this with? How would this work here? Noise sounds like, this is interesting. Send me more information. Let's stay in touch. We should circle back. Those are not bad responses, but they are not the same thing. Mining is knowing the difference. Third shift, build pattern recognition. Start asking, where have deals actually moved before? What did those buyers have in common? What was true before momentum showed up? What role owned the pain? What was the trigger? What was the cost of doing nothing? What environment made implementation easier? That's your Moneyball data, not vanity metrics, not lead count, not how many people said yes to a meeting. The real data is, where does momentum repeat? That's what you mine. Fourth shift, treat relationships like assets, not transactions. Mining happens over time, not in one call, not in one email, not in one LinkedIn message. A relationship can start as a conversation, then become a referral, then become a guest opportunity, then become a pilot, then become a case study, then become a doorway into a larger ecosystem, but only if you treat it like an asset. Most founders are too transactional. They ask, did this close? And if the answer is no, they move on. But miners ask, what is this connected to? That question changes everything. Fifth shift, use small wins to create bigger permission. This is one of the most important lessons in the whole episode. Small wins are not small if they create proof. A smaller district where you can create a visible result is often more valuable than a giant district where you are stuck in committee forever. A smaller pilot that actually gets implemented is more valuable than a massive proposal that never gets approved. A smaller relationship with a leader who trusts you can become more valuable than a big logo that treats you like one of 50 vendors. This is the Moneyball move. Win where others are not looking. Build proof where others are overlooking. Then let that proof expand your reach. That is how smaller organizations win in education. Before we wrap up, quick note. If you're serious about building a real lead engine in education, not just booking meetings, but actually creating consistent momentum, this is the work we do inside the EdSales Elevation Experience. We help founders understand how decisions actually get made and then build systems around that. From defining your perfect client, to targeting the right environments, to mining those environments for real opportunities. This isn't theory. It's what founders are doing right now to create predictable pipelines in education. If you want to learn more, check the show notes or go to joshchernikoff.com/go and we'll walk you through it. All right, let's close this out. Let's bring this together. Billy Beane didn't win by finding more players. He won by seeing value differently. He understood that the obvious game was too expensive, too crowded, too inefficient. So he found a different game. And that's the lesson for education founders. You do not have to chase the biggest district first. You do not have to compete for every obvious opportunity. You do not have to build your confidence on giant deals that may never move. You can build traction differently. You can find the smaller district, the more aligned leader, the sharper pain, the cleaner implementation environment, the buyer who already values the outcome, the opportunity other people overlook because they are too busy chasing the big names. That's mining. And the best founders in education don't win by adding more leads. They win by extracting more from the right ones. They learn the terrain and they study the signals. If they find the vein and they go deeper, they create proof. And then they compound. So here's the question I want to leave you with. Where in your current pipeline are you sitting on opportunity, but not seeing it yet? Where are you walking past gold because it doesn't look like the opportunity you expected? Where are you chasing the big player when the better move is the undervalued one? Because it's probably there. You just haven't learned how to mine it. And once you do, you don't need more volume. You don't need more noise. You need better vision, better signal, better discipline, and a willingness to go deeper where the value already exists. If this hit for you, I'd love to hear what you're seeing differently now. Send me a message and we'll keep sharpening this together. See you on the next show. All right, that's it for this episode of the Ed Sales Edge. Thanks for joining us. If you sell into education, the goal of this show is very simple: to help you stop guessing what actually moves deals in a system where trust matters. If you want to go deeper, join us inside the Entourage, our private community for education founders and operators selling into schools. You'll see the details in the show notes. If this episode helped you think more clearly, that's great. Subscribe, like it, and share it with another founder in the education space. Until next time, get clear, build trust, set up a system for sales, and keep earning your edge.